this anti-bullying webinar. We've had over 500 sign-ups for this event, and I think that really underlines the importance that schools see in really having a very productive and an effective strategy around anti-bullying. We've got some amazing speakers. I'm going to be introducing them shortly. But first of all, I just wanted to provide a little bit of context about why we felt that this event was so important. Hopefully most of you are aware that this is actually Anti-Bullying Week currently, an opportunity for schools in particular to reflect on strategies they're putting in place in order to ensure that all students can feel that they can be themselves and that they are included and valued by their peers. But this also is a very personal webinar for me, because I remembered being bullied when I was growing up, and it's amazing just how vivid some of those memories are decades later, and how for certain students they do trigger deep mental health challenges and challenges that last with them throughout their lives. So this is not a trivial topic at all. I do want to make sure that in terms of our definition of bullying, we understand, of course, that when you have children who are interacting and playing together, there'll always be mild forms of teasing and those sorts of things. Here we are talking about the type of bullying that leaves children feeling really devalued, isolated, cut off from their peers, and does impact their mental health and their well-being. So we'll be going to be hearing from a variety of different speakers in order to understand how they are regarding bullying, how they're supporting schools in having constructive and effective strategies around bullying. Also, how we'll be hearing from some schools in terms of the things that they are doing as well. I just wanted to provide a few housekeeping tips as well. We do want to engage on a conversation in Twitter as well. This is also going to be broadcast on Twitter. So our Twitter handle is @educators. So you can definitely engage in a conversation there. And the hashtag is #StopBullying. Also want to mention that we have a wellbeing app that we launched recently, where we have lots of fantastic resources regarding bullying and helping to empower young people. So we'll be talking about that a little bit later, and we actually have one of the schools using the app because that might be a useful way for you to also be able to tackle bullying at your school. And finally, if you do have any questions, please do pose those. We have my colleague Charlie, who's going to be monitoring those, and we will have a Q&A at the end of the event. So for the last 15 or so minutes, we will be inviting lots and lots of questions from the floor. So add those as those come to you, and we'll be able to ask that to our fantastic panel. So I just want to hand over to our very first speaker. So we have Peter Smith, who's an emeritus professor at the University of Goldsmith. So if each of the presenters can just speak about their experience and their perspective as they lead into that presentation. But thank you so much, Peter, and over to you.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm going to give a sort of overview, really, of the kind of actions that schools can take to reduce bullying. And I'm sure many of these more specific things will be followed up by the other speakers who will follow me. There's quite a lot on my slides. If you want a copy of the slides, email me at that email address there, p.smith@gold.ac.uk. So next slide, please. So just to remember that there are different roles in bullying. There's the children that are doing the bullying, and there can be a ringleader, assistant, reinforcer. We can have victims. We can have those who are in both the bully and victim role. And then there are the bystanders who are perhaps just watching and not doing much. And then defenders who are coming to help the victim. So we need to bear these different roles in mind, I think. Also, the different types of bullying. What we now call traditional or offline bullying, the kind I grew up with, probably that Natalie grew up with, and all of us adults, physical, verbal, social exclusion, rumor spreading, but of course this century, particularly cyber or online bullying. And then we got this category of prejudice or identity-based or bias-based bullying, which is more by virtue of some general characteristics such as gender, race, faith, sexual orientation, disability, rather than the individual, him or herself. We know that being bullied, has negative outcomes, especially for the victims, but generally also for anyone involved, it's bad for the school and the school climate. Next slide, please. Yeah, and looking at the causes of why bullying happens or what we can do about it, this ecological perspective looks at the society, at schools, at the peer group, at the family, and at the individual. All of these areas are important. There's not much we as individuals can do about society. I'm not saying we can't do anything, but it's limited. But particularly schools and the peer group and the family we can think about. And the individual, I think there might be another click on that. Yeah. They might need particular counselling or therapeutic work, perhaps. So next slide. So thinking of the school level, obviously schools should have an anti-bullying policy, either a separate one or embedded in their behaviour policy. And generally research suggests that schools that have an authoritative school climate are going to have less bullying. So that means there are clear standards and expectations about behaviour, including not having bullying, but you consult with and listen to pupils. There's an atmosphere of respect for pupils, listening to their ideas, listening to their expectations, but nevertheless, ultimately, the standards are set by the school leadership. Training and support for teaching staff, but also other staff as well, the dinner staff, the playground supervisors, school bus drivers, the range of people who are concerned and coming into contact with pupils. And then playground work, for example, making interesting playgrounds that children enjoy and are not bored and not tempted to start bullying or teasing others. Next slide. Then there's classroom and curriculum work, a huge variety of things that schools can do here, using stories, videos, theatre productions, role plays, virtual environments, cooperative group work, quality circles, training in social skills, empathy and conflict resolution, assertiveness training, that's shown in the little picture there, the assertiveness training group. So in other words, standing up for yourself without being aggressive. And then things to do with cyberbullying, obviously very important now. We know that cyberbullying might not be initiated in the school, but it does often involve classmates. And there's a lot of overlap between cyberbullying and traditional bullying. So interventions to reduce bullying generally can be relevant for cyberbullying, but you might need more specific interventions as well, such as e-safety training, for example, which will be part of the curriculum. Next slide. Then the peer group. The class norms about bullying are important, and researchers have distinguished descriptive norms and injunctive norms. Descriptive are what others actually do, how others actually behave. Do they defend victims, for example? And injunctive, what you think others will do or expect others will do, and they're not necessarily the same, but both of them seem to be important. And class norms where most pupils think that bullying shouldn't happen, most would defend the victim, they're going to have less bullying going on. Having a friend or defender is really important. It can make a big difference to the life of victims, especially if the friends or defenders have high status in the class, so they're respected in the class. And peer support schemes can be a way of harnessing this impact of the peer group. And there's a great variety of peer support schemes. The picture there shows a group of peer supporters. And we found something like 2/3 of schools have some form of peer support scheme in action. Next slide. The family is important, obviously, in lots of ways. Parents have an important role in working with schools, supporting the anti-bullying initiative of the school, liaising with schools if they have concerns about a child's behaviour. Beyond that, the kind of relationships in the family, such as parent-child relationships, affect the likelihood of the child being involved in bully or victim roles at school. Parents have a role in overseeing use of computers and the internet. It looks like some sort of concerned involvement without being overly restrictive is the best, and that's of course a difficult line to tread for many parents, but that seems to be the general consensus. We shouldn't forget siblings too. Sibling relationships affect the likelihood of being involved in bully or victim roles at school. So if there's bullying between siblings, that can spill over into the school environment as well. Next slide. what to do if bullying actually happens. And we've got three main sort of approaches here: disciplinary measures, non-punitive, and restorative justice. Disciplinary measures, some kind of direct negative outcome for pupils, and that is, of course, advocated by the Department for Education in that quote that comes from their document on their website. And there's a whole range of disciplinary measures there that could be followed up. Some people favour a non-punitive or counselling-based approach, of which the most well-known is the support group method. It was formerly called the no-blame approach, but that was changed for a variety of reasons. And that has a philosophy of not directly accusing or sanctioning the bully or bullies, but instead discuss the suffering of the victim and ask the, quotes, bullies what they can do to help the situation. And there's 7 steps to do that. And then restorative justice is a bit in between the two, really. It aims to repair the harm in relationships. You find out how each person is feeling and what each person needs to put things right. But the wrongdoer, as it were, should acknowledge what they've done. So that's a bit of a difference from the support group method, and find ways to put things right, but not necessarily be punished. It's more a matter of changing their behavior so that things are better in future, restoring good relationships. Next slide. Yeah, last one. Most interventions have a positive effect. So if you're doing some of these things, and in some ways the more the better, I think, then carefully controlled studies suggest something like a 20 to 50% reduction in rates of bullying. Doesn't mean it's gone completely, but knowing how difficult it is to change human behavior, you know, this is important, I think, and worthwhile. So must be careful that some actions could be counterproductive. For example, encouraging victims to tell about bullying without effective follow-up, or stigmatizing possibilities of some peer support schemes. And I could talk about these in question and answer if there's a wish to do so. Okay, so important to stop bullying. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was fantastic, and really good to have an academic kind of grounding around this topic. I also have a couple of questions for you for the Q&A that sprang to mind, so really fascinating stuff. So we're going to move straight on to our next speaker. We have Nicola Murray, who is the head of programs from the Anti-Bullying Alliance. So Nicola, over to you.
Hello, thank you. Yeah, just as you just said, I'm Nicola. I'm from the Anti-Bullying Alliance. So we are a membership organisation made up of members from the anti-bullying sector, and we operate in England, and we are most well known for coordinating Anti-Bullying Week, which, as you all know, is this week. In addition to that, we do a lot of practice improvement work and policy and influencing work, and everything that we do is evidence-based and involves the voices and opinions of young people. I've sent some slides over, and I've just realized that I've made it very, very hard by including slides with lots of animations. So poor Charlie, you might have to do quite a bit of clicking as you go through, but the next slide is safe. Please do move on. Yep, so I really wanted to use my few minutes to talk about the Altogether programme, which is one of those areas of practice improvement work that we do. It's a very large programme. Possibly some of you listening are involved or currently on it, or have been awarded an Altogether award previously. It allows schools in the programme to essentially work towards a gold, silver or bronze award. And next slide, please. And how they do that over the course of the programme is they access our Altogether Hub and the tools within it. So that includes an audit and action planning tool that allows them to look at the strengths and weaknesses of their current anti-bullying work. It includes a whole host of resources to support implementation of their action plan over the course of the programme. It offers lots of CPD training, so e-learning courses that all staff can access, and online seminars, what used to be face-to-face workshops, but this year is online seminars. And then the thing I really want to talk about today, which is an online pupil and wellbeing questionnaire. Next slide, please. So I think this one you might have to click through, but the programme has been evaluated, and a few times at this point. Most recently, in fact, by Peter and his team at Goldsmith. So I'll be in lots of trouble if I'm misrepresenting his results here. But essentially, we know that overall for schools on the programme, that bullying reduced, and that was particularly bullying reported by pupils with special educational needs. We also measure pupil well-being, and that was found to reduce over the course of the programme as well, for pupils who were either targets of bullying or who were bullying others, as they often have low well-being themselves. And we also measure people's feelings about school. So feelings like how well they get on with their teachers, the feeling of belonging in the school settings, and how safe they feel in school. That improved over the programme, and particularly, again, for pupils with special educational needs. Can I have the next slide? So these are some of the things that schools have told us make the programme successful for them. So essentially, as I mentioned, there's an audit tool that allows them to look at the strengths and weaknesses of their current areas. And what schools have told us is that really allows them to view this huge area of anti-bullying, figure out what the things are that they can actually work on and should prioritize in the program period, and make it essentially feel more manageable. And that's something that they've told us is a big plus of the program. The program focuses a lot on definitions, so everyone understanding what bullying is, everyone understanding what role they have to play in it, and that refers to the whole school community. So all staff, all pupils, parents, and the wider community is really important. And then, sorry that my slide's a little funny, but a really, really key part of the program is that it encourages schools to listen to pupils' experience, and gives them the vocabulary to understand bullying, and to talk about it, and to talk about when it's happening to them. Next slide, please. So reporting is really important, and we know that this is often a barrier that schools face. So these are real comments from real young people who told us that some of the key issues that they find around reporting is that, first of all, they don't know who to report to or how to go about it. They say that there's a lack of understanding what bullying is and what it isn't. So these two things really point to not having a clear definition of bullying. So we all have anti-bullying policies. That policy probably contains a definition of bullying, but if that's just sitting, on a page on a website and hasn't been updated since 2014, or sitting on a dusty shelf, then it's no good to anyone. It's really, really, really important that you have a live definition, ideally one that that you've developed, including your school community, that you have a definition, and that everyone in that school community knows what it is, and also what it isn't. Then following on from that, if everyone knows what bullying is, they know when to report it. So what becomes important there is the mechanisms of how they go about reporting it. And then finally, we know that a big barrier sometimes when reporting happens is that it's not taken very seriously. It's either thought of as something that's not a big deal, or perhaps that the blame is laid on the person reporting. And we know that that's an issue in relation to particular groups. So we know that looked after children in particular report this issue. We know that Gypsy, Roma and Traveller children in particular report this issue. And often that's to do with conscious or unconscious biases that staff may have. Can I have the next slide, please? So some things that we know are really important and that have been borne out through the programme are, as I said, having a shared definition of bullying that's displayed throughout the school and known by all staff, pupils and parents. Having a variety of reporting methods. So we know that safety can be an issue. People don't want to make a situation worse, or they don't want to be seen as being a snitch. So having methods that allow private reporting, such as worry boxes, having a bullying @ email address, having a forum on a website, or there's some good online reporting methods as well. Programs like Toot Toot or Whisper, if you're in the Southwest, are very effective. And also thinking about communication needs. So thinking about pupils with communication barriers or physical impairments or learning impairments, how are they able to report, and do they have something that meets their needs? We know that having a rights-based approach to bullying is really important, and focusing on the fact that people have the right to come to school and feel safe is something that can be really helpful in recording and having a culture of openness around bullying. And then finally, conducting a pupil questionnaire at least annually is really important. Next slide, please. So this is a quote from a school who took part in the program, and essentially they said that having that pupil questionnaire was something that, it made them uncomfortable. They found out things they perhaps, didn't want to know, but it meant that they could see something that they would not have otherwise known, that something is going on in that school that pupils weren't talking about, and they could figure out what that is and figure out how to resolve that. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide. But essentially, when conducting that pupil questionnaire, it's really important to again have a questionnaire that either has a really clear definition of bullying right at the start, or doesn't actually talk about bullying at all, but describes bullying behaviors or incidents and allows pupils to talk about them in that way, because how one pupil understands bullying may not be the same as another. We'd also recommend allowing a breakdown so that you can analyze trends and you can analyze the experience of different pupils. So altogether, you can see here, this was the before and after figures for all schools, but you could see that is broken down by gender, by SEN status and free school meal status. And that allows those schools to really see what's going on and target the areas that they need to target. So that's it from me. Just reporting, recording, and listening to your pupils is a key part of your anti-bullying approach.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nicola. So many great tips and insights there. Really appreciate that. So we're going to move straight on to our next speaker. So we have Ellen Mothersdale, who is the assistant head at William Howard School in Cumbria, who's going to talk about their approach to anti-bullying.
Thank you. Yes, I'm the assistant head teacher, and as you can see there, I've got quite an interesting title. My title is Vulnerable Students and Mental Health. So under that remit comes quite a lot of different responsibilities. So Deputy Safeguarding Lead, looks after Children's Coordinator, obviously also the mental health side of things, and Pupil Premium, SEN. So quite a gamut of different things. And part of my role is therefore to support and develop our school anti-bullying strategy. And I've been in the school for a number of years now, so this has been a work that's been developed over a period of years with many of the ideas that some of our speakers have already spoken about. So if you could move on to the next slide, please, Charlie. So on this, what I've tried to show you is that one of the big things that we try to do at William Howard School is we talk a lot about well-being and how we support and develop our well-being and how we make sure that everybody across the school's well-being is supported, and therefore linking that then into the fact that bullying isn't tolerated because it isn't part of supporting positive well-being to students. So the first thing I would say in any school is that you need to make sure that you've got a really embedded programme across your school. So we have looked at making sure that we've mapped our approach to our wellbeing and to our anti-bullying strategy across the entire school. So that's mapped across our curriculum in terms of personal development, drama, English, ICT. So for example, if we have in a production such as Chelsea's Choice, which is to do with online grooming, then we've then got follow-up work that's happening within the PD departments, within the drama departments, etc., and that we know what's happening across the year. We've also made sure that it's embedded as part of our whole school wellbeing strategy. We have a calendar of events that goes across the year, and we're linking all the time within that calendar to our ideas of respect and tolerance for everybody within the school community. It's embedded as part of our safeguarding training for both students and for staff. So it's really important, I would say, to make sure that you have really thought about how it fits into all aspects of your school and your school community. If you could move on, please, Charlie. So just an example of that, we are obviously at the moment, things are a little bit challenging in terms of how school is being run from day to day, but it's also presented some wonderful opportunities. So normally, our assemblies are also part of our embedded themes. So on the slide that I showed you before, we've got support for how we're making sure that we're getting our strategy out to pupils, to parents and to staff. So one of the opportunities that's been presented, instead of doing assemblies, is that I am able to produce a weekly wellbeing broadcast. And as part of that broadcast, we can talk about the effects of tolerance on other different people and about how we need to promote and respect each other. We've really embedded our anti-bullying strategy as well into our school values. So we have 3 main school values, which are respect, responsibility and resilience. And we've made sure that then those are referenced throughout our wellbeing approach and throughout our anti-bullying approach across the entire school. So this is an example of one of my slides from last week to a presentation that I give. So I do a 10-minute broadcast, which I record each week. That's linked into whatever our theme is for the month, which is part of our embedded programme. And then that's followed up in a variety of ways across the curriculum and through parent broadcasts, etc. as well. So on this example, what we wanted to do was to really think about the idea of tolerance and collective responsibility. And so we're making sure that we're linking what's happening in school to our school community, because it's really important to talk about things in the school community. So there's something there for something called Shine Brampton, which is a food bank in the local community, and about how we need to be tolerant of people who may be in need at this time. And then we link that into then national events, so such as Children in Need, Movember. And then I also spoke to them about the fact that we were moving into this whole month is the theme of being united and working together collectively against bullying. If you could move on to the next slide, please. So the other thing was, in terms of that, is making sure that, like I said, it's linked across and embedded across subjects. So we looked at what's happening in history at the moment and the subjects that students are studying in history. So when I've done my broadcast this week, I've linked in information to do with that in terms of how we are different topics that we're teaching. So you've got Emmeline Pankhurst and Rosa Parks there. But we've also then looked at things that are more current and relevant so that students understand what we mean about being united and all coming together. And that idea of promoting tolerance and taking responsibility for looking out for each other. And all of the roles that have been mentioned so far by the other speakers in terms of, promoting that role of the defender and making sure that our students understand their collective responsibility then to work together on that sort of thing. Now, particularly, we talk about all different aspects of bullying. So it's not just I start this session with information about what we actually mean by bullying. So we've talked obviously about the offline world and the online world and the fact that there's no difference. And that's why Alyssa Milano is mentioned there in terms of how powerful actually and what a positive tool for success online and social media can be. So we try and talk about a lot of the positives rather than focusing on the negatives. But we're also realistic as a school, so obviously we want to do a lot to support, particularly cyberbullying. So if you could move on to the next slide, please, Charlie. So we've made sure that as much as possible, it is as easy for our students to find information. So we've tried really hard to signpost all the information that they need in very easy ways. So when the students open their homepage on our internal learning environments, what they see is the anti-bullying information. You can see that that's got a link to our survey as well that we carry out annually. And we've linked anti-bullying and e-safety are very clearly linked together so that the two things go hand in hand. So as part of our strategy for that, on this page, they will find all sorts of different information. So if you can move on to the next slide, please, Charlie. So the first thing we did was we talked really hard, long and hard about what Nicola was talking about a really clear definition, because policies do sit on shelves and students don't read policies, parents don't want to read it all. So we came up with this idea of stop, and the students came up with this idea. So we worked with our wellbeing ambassadors, and they decided that this was a really good way to do. So as you can see there, lots of focus on peer mentors. We've got cyber mentors in place in school, lots and lots of support about how they can be digital citizens, really easy signposting in terms of where you can go, and a simple email that they can do, which is very easy to find. It's on our school website as well. Next one. We've done the same for parents. So we've got lots of information for parents as well. So the parents have got a whole page with advice and information about cyberbullying, how to support their students digitally. We run social media campaigns about that. We've got parent forums. We've also made sure that obviously we work quite closely with local agencies. So the local police, for example, if there are incidents of cyberbullying. We've got internal programs of work that we've developed to work with students, so that we take what Peter mentioned earlier about, we use restorative justice at William Howard School. And as part of that, we then have programs which are about positive behaviour change rather than necessarily just about punishing perpetrators. I'm aware I'm at time, so if anybody's got any further questions, please feel free to ask when we get to the chat section.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ellen, and so much amazing stuff going on at your school. So looking forward to the Q&A session, for hearing more about that. Okay, so we're going to move straight on because we're running a little bit tight on time. So next up is the CEO of Kidscape, Lauren Seeger-Smith. So over to you, Lauren.
Oh, thank you so much. Really lovely to be here with you all this evening. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about Kidscape's work with parents and carers, and giving some advice from our perspective around ways to involve parents and carers in your work to challenge bullying. Next slide, please. A little bit about Kidscape. We were founded in 1985, so we've been around for a while, and you can see our vision and mission there, but principally we're here to give practical support to children, families and schools to prevent bullying. Next slide, please. So what do we offer? Like I said, very much about practical approach. So we do a lot of direct work with children and families. We work with children and families who are currently being impacted by bullying right across England and Wales. We run community workshops for children and their parents and carers. We run in-school workshops. And as Peter mentioned earlier, Kidscape has a big focus on assertiveness skills and giving practical strategies for young people to help them manage a bullying situation. We also now deliver transition workshops to support all children with that move up to secondary school, because we know that's a real danger zone when it comes to bullying. And we also run peer mentoring training, again, that Peter mentioned earlier. In addition to that, we do lots of staff training. We run a parent advice line, and we give a lot of advice and support through our different platforms. Next slide, please. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the main themes that come through our parent advice line, because I think it's really helpful for schools to hear this, because I suspect that these will be some of the similar challenges that you'll be facing. So sorts of things that have come up over the last year, identified by a parent advisor. One thing we get is quite a lot of calls about trauma as a result of past bullying experiences. And there's some examples there. An 8-year-old who had moved schools, no bullying in the new school, but starting to show signs of trauma, including hitting his head, hiding under the table. And a parent there saying, my son is 14 and has PTSD from being bullied in primary school. And this is an area that we're really starting to become progressively more concerned about is how we understand trauma in relation to bullying and how trauma in relation to bullying is handled, particularly through GPs and CAMS services. And we would really encourage schools to be aware of it, because quite often, even if children move to a different school, they do take that trauma with them. And there can be some real challenges about that. So that's definitely something that comes up. Another big issue is the school response. For example, put all this behind you and get on with it. You're being oversensitive because you're a young carer. I'm sorry to say we often don't hear the good side of things. Parents often phone us because the communication with schools has really broken down and they're really struggling to get the situation resolved. We have a lot of calls about the impact on children's mental health of bullying. We've got some examples there. We have a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of self-harming and suicidal ideation as well is really common for people that come through to our parent advice line. So we work very closely with the charity Papyrus and have signposted lots of families to Papyrus if they do have concerns of that nature. But again, I think that's really important for schools to hear, because this isn't something that happens rarely. We get these calls regularly where bullying's having a serious impact on mental health. We get far too many calls about physical assaults in school. And when I say physical assaults, I'm not talking about I understand in schools day to day you deal with a lot of incidents between children and young people, but we have quite a high number of serious safeguarding incidents that come through to us. One example is a primary age child that had been hospitalised 5 times because of bullying, and yet that hadn't gone through to children's services. And so we always say to parents, never put your child in a situation where they're not safe. Bullying is a form of peer-to-peer abuse, and I would just really urge schools to really take that seriously, and you should be involving your children's services teams if children have been seriously harmed in school. School refusal, not surprisingly, that goes hand in hand with bullying. So a number of our callers are getting in touch because their child just won't go to school anymore. They're very school phobic or they're very afraid to go to school. We see a lot of impact on the whole family. So bullying doesn't just affect the children and young people, it affects the parents and carers. We see very high levels of loneliness in parents, feeling despair, feeling like they're not doing the best job they can. And our ZAP community workshops do work with both children and parents to support them. And as Nicola touched on as well, we see very high numbers of calls relating to bullying of children with special educational needs. That's about 20% of all of our calls, and also represents a really high number of children that come through to our workshops. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to touch on, I haven't got long, but a little bit around just some advice off the back of that around what we would say you really need in place in terms of working with parents and carers. It's really good to hear Ellen sharing with us what they're doing at her school. It sounds incredible. I can't underestimate the importance of ethos and values. It's really important, like we had respect and resilience. You need everyone to know what these are and how they relate to all that you do. As Nicola touched on, it's really important to listen to what's going on with your young people, to your families. An annual survey is a really good way of doing that. You need your agreed definition of bullying. We've already covered that. You need to promote your anti-bullying policy. Again, just don't leave it sat on a shelf. Make sure it's really understood by everybody. Again, open communication is so important. And we are seeing at the moment that that's really challenging for schools. Even in my daughter's school, it's not easy when the teachers aren't able to be outside just to have those little quick chats. And so, like we had the example earlier of a very clear email address to report bullying concerns, that's really important, particularly at the moment where communication's tough. As we've touched on, clear reporting process is really, really important, and consistency with that as well, so parents know what to expect. The importance of good meetings, of sitting together side by side. And we always say, that it's so important that we're focusing on the impact and how to resolve the situation. So we have a lot of parents who are very angry, and we talk about the importance of going in calmly and saying to the school, this is what's happening, this is the impact it's having on my child, and how can we work together to resolve this. Take notes, follow up with families. We've talked a little bit about the different ways that you can respond, but it's just really important to take shared learning as well from every incident. What do you need to learn? Bullying very often doesn't happen in isolation. It's more often to do with the wider peer group and the culture of the school and something that's going on. So make sure you're picking up on what that incident's telling you and looking at wider work you might need to do with the whole class group. And again, it's United United Against Bullying this week work together, get parents on side. I said there'd be beware the parent Facebook page and WhatsApp groups, because if you're not really upfront around your approach to bullying, parents will be talking to each other about it and will be talking about each other about it more than ever. So consider having a parent lead for bullying prevention, and because they will be your eyes and ears. So if you need any practical support, please do get in touch with Kidscape, and I welcome questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Right, so we're going to move straight on to our next speaker. So we have Dr. Luke Roberts, who's the CEO at Resolve Consultants. So over to you, Dr. Luke.
Ooh, hi. I'm still getting used to that title. Just quickly to say that I did reference Peter Smith a lot in my PhD. He knows
Luke,
a lot about bullying.
Your mic, there's something not quite right, at least for me, with your mic. Do you want to just move a little bit closer to it, perhaps?
Better? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's a little bit faint, but so just if you speak up, then that shouldn't be too bad.
No problems. So just to say that it is also, although it's Anti-Bullying Week, it is also International Restorative Justice Week. So there's a lot going on there as well in terms of restorative justice. Another thing to say is this kind of topic is really about staff. So I've worked in private schools to prisons, working with young people under the age of 18. And one of the things that is really important that I found is how staff are actually able to listen to the stories that young people tell. So from our side, it's really important to be able to go, right, we know people say that they want to listen, but actually, what's the art of listening well? So I just wanted to cover that quite quickly now. So I'm not going to be particularly long. So next slide, please, Charlie. Brilliant. So at the heart of active listening is a simple message, which is message sent, message received. So if I want to explain my story to a member of staff, are they actually able to receive that message? And I know that sounds so simple that it must be obvious, but lots of time in training, because of the way in which staff have such busy days, the stories about bullying can be lost, or they can be ignored, or in some cases, they can be acknowledged and no action happens. So it's really important that all staff know how to actively listen. And I don't just mean class teachers here. I mean, you know, from the caretaker to the head teacher, everybody needs these skills, because they need to be able to go, right, actually, when a young person is really important, am I in the place and the space to truly hear their story and make sure that story feels valued to them? So this becomes crucial, and there's some problems with this. So Charlie, next slide. I love this kind of scene in Fight Club where they're talking and they basically say, do they really listen, or are they just waiting for their turn to speak again? And I think there can be a real risk of this in terms of, particularly for teachers who know the solution to the problem, and you just need to get on with it. So we've got to be really mindful, are we listening, or are we just waiting to go, right, this is what you need to do and get on? In doing that, we can devalue young people's stories. So again, this is why having the skills within a school around active listening becomes so important. Next slide, please, Charlie. So a little short rant from me. I'm passionate about restorative justice, conflict resolution, but often there is a danger that staff kind of water this down to a form of mediation, which is shake hands. Just shake hands and everything's okay, particularly in incidences of bullying, because it's about young people performing the ritual of remorse to adults and not necessarily resolving the situation between themselves. So this becomes really important to recognise that we have to break off just trying to get to the solution as quickly as possible, and having to use things like active listening to really make sure that young people are in the space and the place to be able to talk. So final slide, I think, Charlie. There we go. So kind of building on Nicola's point, when young people are reporting bullying, we have to recognise that they're going to have concerns about, am I going to be believed, first of all, because one of the things that hasn't really come up so far is around psychological bullying. And so, again, when young people's self-esteem, identity and confidence are attacked, this has an impact on the way in which they feel that they can tell their story. There's also a question of, will I be judged? Will I be seen as weak, for example, or will I be seen as like I deserved it? One of the big challenges for young people is providing evidence, particularly when there's a repetition of a harmful behaviour. How can I demonstrate that, particularly when I might have experienced attacks on my identity, such as, particularly for girls' appearance, is a big one. So how do I prove that I'm going to be believed? And then also there's about previous issues. So this can be the case where a young person moves from being potentially a target to then becoming the perpetrator, or vice versa. And I think staff really struggle sometimes with those mixed identities or those dual identities as well. So there's thousands of ways in which young people can report in schools, but some of the best things that really come out to me is when we're just there to create that space to say, I'm just here to listen. And for me, this is a fundamental way in which we're really going to help address bullying. That is me, done.
Thank you so much, Luke. Really appreciated that, and lots of really great advice and perspectives there. So we're just on to our last speaker now. So if I can just ask Mark Butler, who's a deputy head and senior pastoral lead at a school out in Kenya, to share his perspectives. But again, Mark, if you could just keep it to a couple of minutes, because I do want to make sure that we can move on to questions at the end, I'd be very grateful. So over to you, Mark.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'll try and be as quick as I can. Thank you for having me. As been said, I'm actually in Kenya, and that is relevant, actually, if we move on to the next slide. Relevant because whilst I've been here, I've realised that there's been an ongoing, really quite serious load of issues with regard to bullying, particularly in Kenya. Much higher trends, and these have really come about through sort of issues where students feel the rites of passage and entitlement, and they try and keep things quiet, and it's really sort of laid heavily on my heart. So I've done quite a lot of work with this and wanted to be quite deliberate in what I do with the school, and that really has moved us on. So if we move on to the next slide, moved me on to start thinking about peer mentoring. Now, maybe that's nothing new, but for us, we've been focusing on this thing called baraza groups, which is Swahili for getting together. And Luke was talking about talking, and really for me, this baraza group is really all about students coming together. Now we've changed the vertical to vertical tutoring, so that there can be a much more deliberate, comprehensive peer mentoring program. So the older students are really looking out for the younger ones, and that is really bringing rise to quite a lot of focus on student leadership. Giving them a lot of time and helping them focus particularly on sort of gateway behaviours. So those things that we might sort of forget about because we don't think they're a big deal, we're trying to get those students to address them. Next slide, please. When we're talking about these baraza groups, the way we've been working on it, basically students have about 3 weeks at the beginning of term where they're given a journal, and they go through it very deliberately. There's a lot of seminars, lots of talks about how to do it, role playing, discussions of what you'll do, what you'll say, how you'll interact. And really the focus is for the year 13 students to be working very closely with the year 9s, one-on-one. At the moment it's online, and filling in these journals, and then that moves us on. So if you move on to the next slide, some of the questions will allow, they'll be directed by the mentee, and the mentee will sort of be involved in those conversations. But year 13 is kind of offering practical advice to do with all manner of different things, trying to build up this relationship. Next slide, please. And with that in mind, they also have to agree to this peer mentoring. Now it's different. We also have a peer counselling qualification that students also do. Not all of them, but some of them choose to do this. And that really is involved in them sort of getting a qualification to actually come alongside their peers and learn how to work with them. This peer mentoring is really for all students in the school. They've got to agree, they've got to sign up for it, and then they get involved in sort of what those one-to-one sessions of talking in their baraza groups. Next slide, please. you can see from the slide that's just about to come up, here is an example of the last three sessions that were had by a year 13 student with a year 9, sort of asking some of the questions to try and help them address some of the issues. And a lot of these things actually allow them time to really start unpicking where the issues are. And we found that it's a really deliberate way of sort of addressing some of those problems that are there under the surface, perhaps, and those building up of relationships really do help, and we found they've really helped on supporting those students to deal with some of the obvious bullying concerns that come up. Next slide, please. With the you can see that I'm speeding through it really fast. This I just wanted to share this with you because every week I share a sway, which is a presentation. We take topical issues, things like caring, mental health, altruism and service, trust, communication, diversity. And the year 12 students work with the year 10s and 11s within their Baraza groups, picking up some of these topical issues and really talking to them and having some time with those students to really to enjoy getting to grips and grappling with some of these important things. That's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mark, and sorry to speed you along, but it's just that the time has just flown by, but we've heard some fantastic presentations. Thank you to all of the speakers. So now I just wanted to make sure that we were able to take some questions from the floor. I know, Charlie, you have been monitoring the questions coming in, and we were also given some questions before the session. So do you want to just ask any questions that have come in?
Yeah.
And this is the whole floor, so anybody who feels it's appropriate can respond, but if you could just keep your answers concise, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so a great question that's actually been asked twice was, what strategies would you recommend for telling parents that their son or daughter is a bully? There's often a great amount of stigma around the word bully and they can get very irate. So what would you recommend for that?
I'm happy to come in on that. I think it's just really important as part of your whole approach to bullying that you have really open conversations with the whole community. If you have a shared definition of bullying and a shared understanding, it's important to remember that bullying, it's not about a personality type, it is a behaviour. And if you say to the school community, we are going to address those behaviours and we're going to have really open conversations with one another, and just because we give you a call up to discuss a behaviour, we're here to turn that around and to deal with that rather than naming and blaming your child. So I think that's the approach that we would take.
Charlie, next question.
Is it ever okay for a victim of bullying to hit back?
Oh,
can I jump in on this one? Just to say, firstly, I reject the label victim. I think that is really disempowering to children, and the language that I kind of adopted, and partly based for Peter's work, is target. So if you're a target of bullying, is much more important. I think we have to say, when it comes to this, that children do have a right to self-defense, just like adults, and that's important to acknowledge. But it's also about picking the appropriate strategy as well. So usually, if someone's getting to the point of wanting to hit back, and we're talking about bullying, it's been ongoing for a while. So that means that all parents have really failed to notice the change. So, I think that often comes up if someone's picking on you, hit them back, but then that can fuel further conflict. It's not a resolution. It can just drive the bullying to become even more intense.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Luke.
Has bullying changed as a result of COVID-19? Has there been a downturn or has it just gone online?
Can I just answer that? We've had some quite interesting with our older students, actually. I would say that there have been some changes in that there is, because people have missed so much time out of school, if they then have to miss more time out of school, there's been a little bit of negativity around how people are then identified and tracked and traced, and some of the peer pressure that then has put onto people in terms of the online messaging and things that has gone on between communities. So I would say that yes, for us as a school, it's changed in terms of just the way that what students are talking about, I suppose, not the way that they're doing it. It's still happening online, but some of the things that are the ways in which they're being bullied and the things they're being bullied about have changed slightly in our experience over the last sort of half term.
Thank you, Ellen. Charlie, any more questions?
Yeah. If a student is being bullied at home and it's coming from the parents or siblings, what recommendations can you give for supporting that pupil?
Again, there's some really good, to look at local agencies, there's some really good local support. I mean, we've got Bernardo's are fantastic. We've got Young Minds and a Your Voice. So getting the students to some advocacy type work is a really good one, and working on the assertiveness programs. I think Peter mentioned the assertiveness type of stuff. But I mean, getting them, particularly the Bernardo's and Your Voice, have been really strong and powerful ones for our community, for them to be able to, the students to be able to voice their concerns a little bit more and have an advocate that works with them and helps do that, so it becomes less emotive in terms of the way that they're dealing
I'd just say
with that.
just quickly on that as well, from what we see, again, I think it's remembering that, you know, sibling bullying can turn into a form of peer abuse, and I think that's really important. Sometimes it is underplayed, and it can be difficult to get support for a child who's going through, you know, a serious sibling bullying incident, but that should go to children's services teams and be raised as a serious concern. So I think it's not always taken seriously enough, I don't think, in the current time.
Okay, and from the other end of the spectrum, if a parent, for example, is complaining that their son or daughter is being bullied, but it's more of a falling out, what would you recommend? How would you recommend the school handles that?
I'm happy to step in. I think this is where we come back to definitions. So having a definition of what bullying is and what it isn't also is really important. So we would refer to something like that as relational conflict. So working that out with your pupils and with the whole community is really important. The other thing, Peter talked about the roles involved in bullying. And so it's almost never just between, you know, an aggressor and a target. There's people who play a part as reinforcers or you know, even bystanders. So understanding the range of the roles involved in bullying and the effect that all pupils have is really important too.
And I'm just going to ask a quick question of Peter, if that's okay. So Peter, you talked in your presentation about educating pupils on the consequences of bullying and the suffering of the person who's the target of bullying. So how effective do you think those strategies are if in terms of really tackling bullying behaviour?
Yeah, I mentioned these three kinds of strategies: the disciplinary, the counselling, and restorative justice. And there's been a limited, we need to do more research on this really. We need to find out more which works best. But there has been some research. But generally speaking, they find that all of these can work quite well as long as they're followed consistently and as long as things are followed up. So you do some actions with the children involved. Don't just leave it there. Make sure you follow up what happens next week, you know, next month even, to see if things have really stopped rather than just picking up again or being transferred somewhere else. So I think it's, obviously things should be done with respect, even if you're doing a disciplinary measures. There's ways of doing that, you know. Whatever you're doing, make sure it's carried out thoroughly and followed up.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to have to leave it there, actually. I'm sure we have lots more questions that have come through, but we're pretty much at time, and I just wanted to make a few kind of closing remarks. So to those of you who are watching who are not familiar with us as Educate, one of the things that we do is we connect schools with lots of great provision, including some of the speakers on this call. So if you want to reach out to us so we can connect you with any of the speakers or any others in this space or in other spaces around pastoral care, then do reach out to us. You can just drop us an email and we will certainly connect you with relevant support. I also wanted to mention that we have an app one of the schools that we work with actually said, you know, if we are supporting students, we have to do it on their terms. And obviously we know that students spend so much time on their phones. So this is an app where there's a wealth of support around anti-bullying, including some videos called Moving from Being a Bystander to an Upstander, standing up for your peers. And we've heard a few people talking tonight about the importance of that and the cultural changes which are going to need to happen in schools. So if you want to sign up for a demo, this is a link to do so, or you can drop us an email as well. So the hour has gone so very, very quickly. I certainly have learnt a lot. I already knew quite a bit, but I've definitely learned a huge amount in terms of the speakers. I think you guys have been absolutely phenomenal. I've really appreciated you sharing your thoughts and your insights. As I said, we see this as an ongoing conversation. If there's any way that we can support any of the schools who are watching, please do get in touch. But thank you for joining. Thanks again to the speakers, and I hope that you are, able to implement some really effective strategies this week around anti-bullying support for your schools. Thank you so much, and have a great evening. Thanks, guys. Bye.